I want to talk about people play, people talk, and looking into, during this talk, into organic traffic and word of mouth on mobile. Quickly about Vuga, we already hit a little intro right now, but some more. Founded in 2009, based in Berlin. We have people from more than 40 nations and made 5 hits in 6 years. And showing these. Monster World, back in the day on Facebook, that's actually the game where I started working, was sort of a crazy farming game, a bit with a twist. Bubble Island, you may have heard of. Diamond Dash, Pearl's Peril, and Jelly Splash are, were so far our most successful games. And then about me, but that's also kind of has been covered already, but maybe one thing that hasn't been covered, I love carbonara. So if you also do, let's get in touch after. So we'll start with some simple stuff that you all heard about before. The general formula for marketing is sort of your customer value needs to be bigger than your customer acquisition cost, otherwise you don't really have a profitable business. In our ecosystem, that mostly boils down to LTV greater than CPI. And just briefly how we look at LTV, for us it's the revenue from players until day 360 of their gameplay. And then you get these nicely shaping curves that you can see here. And on top of that, there's the ad revenue that also enters that equation. So that's also can be a pretty significant amount of money that then helps you to cover marketing cost. And on the other side of the equation, we have CPI. So how is that generated? Spend $1,000 on marketing, digital marketing, show 1 million banners to people out there, you get 12,000 clicks and 600 install from these. So that's kind of the funnel, and then you end up with a CPI, so a cost per install of $1.66. Now, this is all nice, but there's, so we all do this a lot, but there's additional sources for digital, for games. Sorry, there's somehow, they're not synced, so I'll just look up there. So what comes in on top of that is word of mouth, as was mentioned before. Social media, discovery in the app stores, search on mobile, brand effects and press. And all this is what we call organics, or what I mean by organics in today's talk. And things driving these are, above all, I think, a fun product. Then influencers, app store optimization, PR, offline marketing that you may be doing, TV, and one thing that all these sources have in common is that they're not easy to attribute to the source that the people came from. And that's, I think, a topic we have all been thinking about quite a lot. So let's make an example how significant this traffic can be. Now looking at Jelly Splash, during a certain time period, we had this amount of installs from digital marketing at a CPI of X dollar. And during the same time period, we got that many. Right. So as you can see, this pretty significantly reduces the cost of acquisition, and you get an eCPI of just 30% of the original CPI. Similarly, for Pearl's Peril, let's say we do this amount of digital marketing during a time period, and at a CPI of Y dollar, so unsurprisingly, they're not the same. And we get this amount of organics on top of that. So in that case, the CPI is only reduced to roughly 70% of the original CPI through the organic traffic. All in all, this shows us that organics contribute majorly to making app marketing profitable. And that's why we decided to look into that a bit more. And the actual equation that we're interested in a way, to see if a game is marketable is LTV being greater than eCPI. So moving a bit away from the pure performance marketing perspective that has been adopted a lot. So we decided we want to better understand organics. This involved a few things. So first of all, we wanted to predict organics for marketing budgeting. So when you decide how much money are we going to spend in the next half year on which game, it's good to know how many organics you're actually going to get if you want to achieve a certain ROI on your game. Then we wanted to model organics in LTV, so to attribute the organic effects that we're going to see to the LTV of the players in the game. And also we were interested to see if we can identify a snowball effect, meaning, this is probably the most difficult topic of all. If you do orchestrated campaigns, if there's ways of achieving multiplicative effects in terms of user acquisition, people talking about the game, and so on. So we started off by predicting organics using pretty simple predictors like DAU, marketing metrics, if the game was featured or not. This worked pretty well, so the predictions we got were very close to what we saw if you cross-validated that. However, what we saw is this doesn't enable a conceptual understanding of what's happening. So yeah, you predict this thing, but you don't know what's happening in the model behind it. And this raises one main concern, which is the out-of-sample performance. So if you use this model for budgeting and you ramp up your marketing spend significantly, you're probably going to get really bad predictions of organic traffic. So we decided to look at it a bit more, and well, this is now a nice visualization. What this shows you is for 3 of our games, the paid installs per month, and then the organic uplift we saw on top of that, so the organic to paid user ratio during that month. And one main thing you start noticing pretty quickly is like whenever there's a lot of paid installs, the ratio goes down. So this sounds, yeah, we were thinking like what's maybe behind that, and looked at this in more detail by building these, what we called then just internally uplift response functions. So meaning if you put on the x-axis the paid installs that you get during a month, what's the organic uplift going to be like for this number of paid installs? And now here what you see is for different geos, for the 3 games, what these response functions looked like. So the relationship was really clear, as you can see. I mean, there's some more hazy ones, like this one, but overall, fit surprisingly well. However, yeah, okay, and what we built based on that was a log-log model. Basically, it's like an elasticity from more classical sales models, where we then had per game, per geo, the input of paid installs, and we're modeling how much uplift we're going to see globally. And yeah, this is something you could quite well use in budgeting. It at least makes sure that you don't overestimate organic effects, because it's pretty conservative for the upper part of paid user acquisition. So as you can see here, if you ramp up to 500,000 paid users, yeah, your uplift goes down a lot, depending on the game, of course, but it's much lower, of course, than here in front. And this was one key requirement we had, because we didn't want to be over-optimistic. However, this relationship could be fully spurious, right? So you have this people coming in organically, and then if you ramp up your marketing and they stay the same, you're going to get this relationship without any actual link between the paid marketing and the organic traffic. So we went back to thinking a bit about these sources, and yeah, decided that we want to look into word of mouth a bit more, because historically it has been pretty relevant for many companies in terms of growing their products, and actually looked at what other industries had been up to. And there's this guy, Ivan Miesner, he wrote a big managerial guide on how to tap into word of mouth for your marketing strategy. Yeah, and he said, so it's the world's most effective, yet least understood marketing strategy, and this actually still holds today, sort of. If you look at some facts from other industries, what you find is that 75% in certain studies happen face-to-face, 15% over the phone, 10% online. Drivers of word of mouth generally are customer satisfaction, and related to that, the trust and brand commitment of your customers. Nielsen, the market intelligence company, actually says it's the most trusted source of consumer information, and that's now pretty relevant. It's also the one that's most likely to be acted upon. So if a friend tells you about a product, right, you're likely to adopt it. And word of mouth customers add more value and create more word of mouth in turn. But there's actually nobody has really looked into it on mobile, or at least written about it much. So we, yeah, now showing some people from the team. This is actually our internal team logo, because you always need to sell analytics to the company a little bit. It's not, yeah. And yeah, these are the guys we worked with. So that's Paul, one of our data scientists, Timothy, who's embedded in the marketing team, and me. And what we did is we did a survey, or that's actually still ongoing. So this is not final results you're seeing now, but work in progress. Also looking forward very much to your thoughts on it, and some quantitative analyses. So you've already seen some of these, but there's one more I want to show you. So with the survey in Jelly Splash, what we find is that 50% of the organic traffic actually comes from word of mouth. And then the split between, so social media sort of is the electronic word of mouth, right? The split between offline and online is 70 to 30 roughly. But I mean, these numbers, yeah, I wouldn't fully rely on them, but I think it gives an indication how important offline word of mouth is also on mobile. So you may think, hey, it's all online and so on, so online will be the key channel, but it actually seems that people, I mean, it's also clear, right? How often have you been in front of a TV with friends, somebody's playing a game, you're like, hey, what are you doing? And then you hear about that game. Then, because we had seen in previous research that word of mouth users were supposed to be adding more customer value for the company, and we also found that, because, I mean, this was a self-reported survey, right? So we asked the people where you're from, which allowed us to set flags in the tracking data, and then we could see how they developed in the game and how their performance was compared to other users. And as you can see, compared to mobile ads and people coming from the App Store charts, they over-index on day 7 retention and also in terms of the number of rounds they've played until day 7. And we think that's because there's a social targeting mechanic involved. So you are more likely to tell a friend about a game when you think that friend will like it. You won't probably talk to someone if you think you'll just annoy them with proposing a game. So this showed us word of mouth is very important, and now we also had the feeling we're getting a bit closer to a conceptual or more conceptual understanding of organics at least. And we're asking ourselves what causes organic traffic and word of mouth in mobile. And there's one technique I want to show you in that regard that you may have heard of, not sure, the Granger causality test. What this test tells you is if one time series, so in this case time series X, is causally predictive of another time series. And how this test works, it's basically comparing if certain patterns always precede patterns in the other time series. So this is not something that tells you causality for sure. So right, you could also put the number of chickens in Vietnam and people drowning in swimming pools in Canada there and might find patterns, even though that's fully spurious, of course. But if you combine this with thinking about why there might be something, it can be a very useful tool and at least tells you what actually could be causally predictive. So we did these for Jelly Splash first, and what we found to be causing organics is DRU, so daily returning users, which is a proxy for your loyal customer base, engagement of this user base, and this relationship especially, or was strongest on a country level and not that clear on a global level. What wasn't causing organics, and now this may come as a shock to some people at first sight, new users, but also the marketing volume, and that's what marketing people, of course, don't really like to hear. However, I mean, this doesn't mean marketing doesn't make sense. We'll get to that later again. And for Pearl's Peril, the results were a bit different. So their marketing volume actually was causally predictive of organics globally and in countries where there was strong marketing activity. I would also say, compared to the size of the user base, our marketing activity in Pearl's Peril is much stronger than in Jelly Splash. So this is a good point for the marketing people, I guess. And DRU in some large countries with limited activity, limited marketing activity. And what wasn't causing organics was engagement in all countries and globally, and this was a very strong finding. I mean, so in Jelly Splash it really was, also looking at different measures of engagement, but in Pearl's Peril it wasn't. That was a bit puzzling. So if we summarize that, then looking at how engaged people actually are, in Pearl's Peril the rounds per player per time period is much higher than in Jelly Splash, so it's roughly 2.5 times what we see in Jelly Splash. So people, or the players in Pearl's Peril, are actually more engaged. But this is not causally predictive of organics. So yeah, summarizing these, we have substantially lower organics in Pearl's Peril versus Jelly Splash. These are not consistently caused by a loyal customer base and its engagement, even though the engagement is very high, and the marketing activity is partly causal. So we took these facts, discussed it over coffee, and thought about it, well, what you need to do then is to develop a narrative that you can put around this, right? Because it's not clear what it means. And what we think is the reason for this is the target audience. So the breadth of appeal of these two games is very different. If you look at Pearl's Peril, it's a hidden object game, which I personally also find is a pretty niche game mechanic. I can't get hooked on it. I have trouble to get hooked on hidden object. And Jelly Splash is something that is appealing to more people, and also, if you think about it, I mean, that's a game I personally have talked to people at dinner parties everywhere. I myself have talked to people in many cases about Jelly Splash and shown them the game and generated installs for Vuga, but I admittedly haven't done that for Pearl's Peril. It could, of course, also be because I'm not hooked, but I also think it's just because, thank you. I think it's also because it just doesn't appeal to that many people. And then the audience you have for speaking about something is, of course, a function of other things, like how innovative is your product and also the timing. So if you think about WhatsApp and other messaging apps, they all are great technical products, but only one of them had the right timing. So trying to put all this into a model that enables us to understand this a bit better, you start off with your paid marketing, which sets up a loyal, satisfied, hopefully satisfied customer base for you, that then generates word of mouth. And word of mouth is part of organics, so there's of course still other sources inside the organics, but well, we're still waiting for the survey results in Pearl's Peril, but we think we'll see a similar share of word of mouth in the organics. And then what comes on top of it is this sort of what I call audience filter. Yeah, this is where we are currently and how we think about organics and word of mouth. This is still ongoing and happy to discuss this. Yeah, but I think it's for now, yeah, pretty good, well, the closest we get to understanding the phenomenon. And then putting some learnings into a nutshell for you guys, so you also have something to take away. People play, people talk, yes, this is true, but they need an audience. This is very different for different apps, so you need to think about it really for different games in different ways. And if you want to break it down or pinpoint it very much, you could say, hey, these broad audience games, you try to rather make eCPI way lower than CPI by having a lot of organic traffic, whereas in a niche audience game, you really need to make sure that monetization is strong enough, monetization and retention are strong enough to cover the cost of user acquisition. So this would be pretty distinct sort of ways of thinking about marketing. You need to think about this on a country level, because word of mouth happens inside countries and different markets have different levels of saturation for different genres and so on. And timing is of course important. Yeah, and now I wanted to add a slide here where I'm showing Vuga jobs, but the uploader didn't work, so I'll just say it. Please check out our job site. We're recruiting, and I'm also hiring an analyst for the team. So if you know someone, very happy to take your referral. And with that, thank you. Feel free to get in touch.
So I come from product management, and I played both Jelly Splash and Pearl's Peril, and I'm also interested in that part of people sharing what they play. Sometimes they're a bit shy, and they even hide some of the games they are playing. And we know, for example, a criminal scene, people share a lot that they're playing, and it is hidden objects. So I'm also all the time thinking about, I'm wondering if you checked features inside the game and how they impact word of mouth, you know, all the sharing and things around that.
Yeah, that's definitely the next step. Yeah, so I think there is these, not only in features, but also in terms of product marketing, if you give it a name that people, a name with a twist, right, that people think about and also are more likely to remember and talk about, all these things can help a lot. We don't know yet what features exactly would be driving word of mouth. I mean, of course, for the electronic word of mouth, it's the typical stuff that we all used in social gaming. Yeah, we don't know yet. So, and then it's interesting to hear that so what kind of organic uplift do you see for your hidden object game? Is it very high organic uplift? So what I'm trying to say is like, word of mouth probably will have the same share in organics, I would assume, for hidden object, but we don't have these results yet. But just overall, it's more limited because the audience isn't that big. But that, of course, also depends a lot on the sort of hidden object game you have. There could be, well, I think Criminal Case probably appeals more broadly than other hidden object games. So would you be able to say how many organics you're getting, roughly?
So actually, I'm coming from Fantomic, and we have a platform for kids. So for example, right now inside our catalog, we have one hidden object by Disney. So I can't really share, but for example, do you know Criminal Case, the hidden objects one? I mean, I just, here in Israel, I see it talked about and shared a lot. So this is why I asked. And also in general, because I'm thinking about features that can increase word of mouth, but I don't have specific data to share, so sorry.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Let's have a warm welcome for Julian.